folks, and welcome to the section of notes on the immune system and vaccines. In this section, we're just going to give you a general overview on how the immune system works and discuss how that relates to how vaccines work. Let's begin. So just a general overview here. You can kind of break your immune system down into 3 lines of defense. Kind of like in this castle picture here, how do we keep invaders out, and if they get in, how do we kill them? First line of defense is just keeping them out. If you don't get them in, you don't get sick. Second line of defense, kill everything that gets in, don't care what it is. Third line of defense is more specific, more specialized. It's your last ditch attempt to kill a specific invader. This one is specific, it's kill invader X. So let's go into these a little more deeply here. So first line of defense, keep things out. It's kind of like this curtain wall around this castle, the very outer wall. As long as that's intact and nobody can get past it, all the troops and stuff in the castle don't have to do anything. So the best way to not get an infection is to not let in your body in the first place. So what structures and materials help keep these invaders out of our bodies? Well, we have the skin. It's difficult for anything to get past intact skin. Even microscopic cuts can provide a point of entry. So just this tiniest little cut on your hand would be a way for things to get in. Now, if your skin's intact, it's extraordinarily difficult for pathogens like viruses and bacteria to get into your body. Now, that covers the outside. Next up, we got the mucous membranes. Sounds a little funky, but basically it's just your skin, but on the inside of your body. So, up your nose, inside of your mouth here, the inside of your digestive tract and your urinary tract and your reproductive tracts. Those are all places where potentially pathogens can go from outside your body to inside. This is not technically inside my body. It's not technically inside my body. It's still outside. It's still outside air there. Nothing's crossed over a cell membrane into the tissue proper. So mucous membranes work pretty good to keep those things out. Not as good as our skin. That's why we protect our mucous membranes when we're trying to avoid infection. We also have some chemical weapon defenses too that just keep things out. Our skin is slightly acidic. If we swallow something, our stomach acid takes care of most things, which is why we don't usually get sick from pathogens we eat, with a few exceptions. We have digestive enzymes in the mouth, in the stomach, and even the eyes, your tears. They serve a function not just to clear out debris, but to also try to kill off some pathogens that get into your eyes. And then, of course, you got mucus, traps pathogens and germs, so then you can expel them out of your body, traps them before they get too deep. All right, now let's say that in this castle analogy up here, the invaders were able to get past that first wall right up next to the second wall, okay? And this is where the defenders are looking over the wall and they can see them and they got their bows and arrows and their crossbows or boiling oil, which they didn't usually really use. They used hot sand maybe or just throw stones on people's heads. But regardless, darn, some little buggers made it past your first line of defense and now are inside your body. What happens next? At this point, if they're between this outer wall and this inner wall, they're inside your body. The defenders of the castle, your defenders of your body, just kill anything that doesn't belong in there, which is anything. How does your body know it doesn't belong? Antigens. Antigens, we talked about these a bit when we talked about blood type before. They're little ID flags on cells to let your body know it belongs or doesn't belong. If you got the right set of flags, you're good to go in our bodies. If you got the wrong set of flags, you're going to trigger an immune response. It's something that our body doesn't recognize as being part of us, and it will try to kill it. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys seen the Marvin the Martian Daffy Duck cartoon where Daffy Duck hops out of his spaceship, tries to claim this planet in the name of Earth, and then Marvin the Martian jumps out and tries to claim the planet in the name of Mars, and their little flags have Earth and Mars on them, trying to say that it belongs or doesn't belong with them. You can kind of think of the antigens like those flags. So now how do we kill these things that are in our body that have the wrong ID flags or the wrong antigens? Well, we have cellular defenses. We have some cells that will attack anything that doesn't have the right flag. They don't care what it is, be it a bacteria, be it a virus, be it a heart transplant. These cells are going to try to kill it because it doesn't have the right set of flags. Okay, that's why people who get transplants need to make sure they've got the right set of flags. They got to get an organ match, right, to make it less likely that their immune system is going to try to kill it. So we have some cells that do that. You don't need to know the names, but they're kind of fun names. Phagocyte means cell eater, and natural killer cells just sound cool. But they go in there and they try to kill anything that doesn't belong. Fevers. Aren't fevers bad? Yeah. If they're too high, they can denature proteins and enzymes. We talked about that in earlier units. But a moderate fever is actually good when it comes to fighting infection. It's part of the body's natural response to an infection. It causes the body to hang on to things. Microorganisms need to function. So if you're running a slight fever, your body hangs on to zinc and iron, doesn't let it out, and the bacteria can't reproduce without those things. The higher fever also increases your metabolic rate, the rate at which your chemical reactions are happening, so your body can work faster to repair and fix itself. That's also part of the reason why you're a little more tired when you get sick, when you have a fever, because your body's working hard to fight the infection. So a slight fever is actually just a sign that your body's doing what it's supposed to be doing to fight an infection. It's not necessarily caused by the infection. It's your body's response to the infection and how your body's fighting that infection. Some other responses you might get would be a runny nose, watery eyes, sneezing. All those are responses to keep more germs from getting into your body. Headaches, that's sometimes a side effect because you get mucus buildup in your sinuses and things. And those last ones I was talking about might sound a little bit like allergies. Yeah, because what's an allergic response? An allergic response is just your body trying to get something out of it that it thinks doesn't belong, even though it's not really harmful, like pollen. Pollen's not going to harm you if you're allergic to pollen, but your body, in your particular situation, if you got an allergy to pollen, it recognizes pollen and says, pollen, we should kill it. And it does all these things that the immune system is supposed to do to fight infections, right? It'll give you a runny nose, watery eyes, sneezing, all those kind of things. So allergies are related to the immune system and the secondary line of defense. Just kills anything that your body says doesn't belong. Okay. All right. And that brings us to, if pathogens or germs get into the body and overwhelm the second line of defenses, they get over that big wall and into the middle of the castle. Okay. And now you don't know who's friend and foe in there, right? When they're outside, you just kill them all. But now they're inside the castle, you better be a little bit more careful about, who you're trying to target if you're trying to save that castle, right? Because you don't want to accidentally kill, the blacksmith or the stable boy or anything like that inside your castle. So what do? Do we surrender then? Because, it's too bad, we got past our second line of defense? No, we call in the specialists, the special forces, this highly trained elite force designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to kill that one invader, be it COVID or an invading army in our castle. Kill the bad guys, not the good guys. Very specialized thing. So let's take a look at this last line of defense. This is the one that's probably the most important for what we're talking about in this unit. All right, so I've broken this down to like 4 parts. So the first thing you got to do, if you're going to get these specialized forces working for you, is you got to recognize the threat. We have scout cells that are on the lookout for foreign invaders. Okay, they're looking around. Anybody doesn't belong. Anybody doesn't belong. If they find one that has the wrong antigens, the wrong ID flags, what they're going to do is they're going to pass that intel onto cells that will try to make antibodies for those specific antigens, for those ID flags. So they're going to take that image, like, we got these guys are invading. Hey, research and development, can you make an antibody that'll kill this? And that's kind of what that part 1 is, recognize the threat. We've got scout cells looking for that. So now we've got it to research and development. We got more specialized training, like these guys up here. They're not in basic training anymore, killing, just taking on anybody. These ones are specialized to, defuse bombs or something, for instance, in this picture. So to build an army, that takes time, right? And you notice I do have the label as primary immune response. We'll talk about why in a minute. It takes time to build that army. So you got like 3 to 6 days before the immune industrial complex, if you will, can start making the specific antibodies. It's a lag period. So this foreign invaders running around your body, it's gotten past the first line, it's gotten past the second line, it's running around, it's starting to increase, it's starting to make you feel more sick, and you're not ready to fight back yet because you weren't ready for it. You didn't have the antibodies ready, you didn't have your factories tooled up, you didn't know how to make the antibodies. They're going to kill this guy. So it takes you time to start making that stuff. Eventually you do, and then you reach peak antibody levels sometime around 10 to 14 days after you get infected after you get what they call challenged with the pathogen. And so at that point, now our custom built army, these antibodies are starting to get the upper hand, and you will start to feel better. Generally, around 10 days to 2 weeks after you start feeling ill, you're going to start feeling better. So that's why we get that time frame on feeling better. Okay, and then antibody levels will start to decline as you kind of mop up any leftover invaders. But wait, what happens if we get invaded or exposed to this thing again? Okay, we took care of them the first time. We got sick. We weren't feeling good. Took a while to build up our antibodies, but no, we got there eventually. What happens if we get hit again? So we go into what I say, never forget part of the second. So the first one was primary immune response. Those first two parts I talked about, that's the first time you're exposed to COVID or chickenpox or what have you. Okay, now we're getting ready for a second exposure. So we call it the secondary immune response. So part three, I termed never forget. So our bodies, now we know there's this threat out there, right? And we're not about to let them catch us with our pants down again, right? We know that COVID's out there. We know that chickenpox is out there. We don't want to just toss out all the antibodies, toss out all the factories and all that knowledge we gained from fighting the first time. No, we hang on to that. Okay, we have memory cells, which are kind of like mothballed factories or mothballed military equipment, like you see up here, these planes that are mothballed at Peman Air Station in Arizona. They're not active. It's going to take a little bit to get them going, but it's a heck of a lot faster than trying to build planes from scratch next time we need them. So we kind of mothball them there. Our bodies do that. We mothball those antibody factories so they're ready to go. And if we do get exposed again, we can start them right away. And we can build our antibody army right away. And so it's kind of like keeping that field manual, that knowledge of what we've got so we can do it again. And in the meantime, we do maintain a small standing army of antibodies as well. So you keep some of those antibodies to COVID or chickenpox, what have you, circulating in your bloodstream all the time, kind of a low level, not a big army, but a small army. It's just floating in there, just waiting, just in case. We're not going to let our defenses down a second time. So part four, let's say you are invaded, you are infected. Now it's time to crush them with overwhelming force, like I got in this checkerboard here. The black pieces are going to overwhelm those white pieces and just crush it. Our small antibody army is going to jump right on the first few invaders. So the first few virus particles or bacterial particles get in, our immune system is just going to jump on them. Those antibodies are going to just start fighting them right away. They're not going to give them a chance to get a foothold in our bodies. While the standing army is doing that, while the antibodies are doing that, the mothballed factories, those memory cells that were geared up to make the antibodies before, we're gonna be able to switch those on right away, immediately ramp up antibody production faster and higher than even the first time. No lag period now. You get invaded, you start making antibodies. You don't have to figure out how to make them. You don't have to build the factories. Factories there, you know how to do it. You just got to turn them on. And we start pumping out antibodies. And if first time we pumped out antibodies to about this level and took that long, this time it takes that long and we make that many antibodies. We really jack it up. And so generally we wipe out the enemy before we even feel any effects or know we're exposed. Okay, that's why you don't get sick a second time with chickenpox generally, or most illnesses, because your body's already got practice against it and you can wipe it out before they have a chance to reproduce and start making you actually really feel ill. We dominate them, okay, with that secondary immune response. So here we can see on this diagram, on the bottom here, we've got the time in days, and on the side, we've got the levels of antibodies. So your first exposure at day 0, it takes, like I said, 3 to 6 days to start making antibodies. So you can see we had a lag period there where there's no antibody production. Then we get to that blue line. Antibodies ramp up about 10, 14 days later. We're at peak, depending on your body and everything. And then they start to fall back down because you've probably killed off and you're winning the battle. So the antibody levels start to drop as you start to mothball those factories. But you notice we never let those antibodies go down to 0 again. There's always some, even there on day 28, or if we were to extend this thing out without getting infected again, day 300, there's going to be some antibodies. Then we can see here the second exposure to that first antigen. No lag period, just boom, straight up. And look how many more antibodies we make, and look how much faster we make them. And then those levels stay higher longer. And we just wipe that enemy out before we even know we're sick. And then the purple line over here is just what happens if a different virus or bacteria get in. We go back and start over again with that one. So that is a good summary of how our immune system works. Now, that brings us to vaccines. How do they work? And why are we talking about them after learning about the immune system? Why am I doing vaccines now, not some other time? Well, it's because vaccines work with our immune system. Okay, so basic overview. Vaccines basically take advantage of our specific immune system, or that third line of defense we were talking about before, where you're building the antibodies specifically to kill that one thing. What vaccines do is they challenge your immune system. They present your immune system with the antigen, the ID flags. So they don't take generally like a whole COVID vaccine and stick it in your body and say, hey guys, here's COVID, come kill it. No, what they do is they take a little piece of that COVID, the little spike protein that you may have heard about, or other things, something of that COVID that our body can recognize, but not going to get you sick because it doesn't actually have the whole virus in there. And we'll inject that into us. And so what happens is our immune system thinks we're getting invaded with something. There's something that doesn't belong. It got past our first and second line of defenses because we injected it with a needle. Now it's going to recognize that, it's going to take it, they're going to start building antibodies for that. Even though there's no real enemy to fight, your body triggers that response and you start making those antibodies, you start making those factories. Essentially what that does is gives your immune system practice fighting the antigen, but without the risk of getting actual germ. So let's relate that back to our specific immune system steps we talked about. So part one, we recognize the threat. The scout cells find the vaccine antigen and relay that information to the antibody factory cells. Part two, we build the army. Our antibody factories build an army of antibodies to fight the quote unquote enemy, even though there's nothing to fight. But now we have a small standing army of antibodies. And we're at part three, never forget. Our bodies now quote unquote know that the threat is out there. Okay, they at least they think there's a threat out there of COVID or chickenpox or whatever, and they're going to maintain a small standing army of antigens and mothball some factories so that we can get, if we get infected again, we can, number four, crush them. When we really do get infected, when some of those COVID or chickenpox viruses get into our body, our immune system is all ready for it. It's all over those germs. Antibodies in the system attack them right away, no lag period, and the factories start pumping out insane numbers of antibodies. And the germs never do hit them, and neither do you. You don't even know that you had those viruses or bacteria, or whatever it is, get into your system because you kill it off so quickly and so efficiently. That's how vaccines work. They just take advantage of our own immune system and they bulk it up. They allow our bodies to fight the real invader. Now, question you often get is, why do I sometimes get quote unquote sick after a vaccine? Why do you get sneezy and tired and all that kind of stuff? You just got to look back at what we were talking about with how the immune system works, right? At that second line of defense to see why vaccines can sometimes cause symptoms we associate with illness, like a moderate fever. We're trying to get your body to think it has a foreign invader. So what's it do when it happens? Ramps up metabolism to help fight it. Moderate fever. Sometimes people get runny noses, watery eyes, sneezes. Okay. Once again, your body thinks it's got an invader, so it's going to ramp up its attempts to keep more from getting in. Okay, runny nose and watery eyes just keeps anything that gets in your nose and eyes from getting deeper into your body, flushes it out. Sneezes, clears it out of your airway. Coughing and headaches, since we got runny nose, we got some mucus being produced. You might get headaches from sinus headaches. You might get coughing from mucus running down the back of your throat, sore throats, those kind of things. Those are side effects. You're not actually sick. It's just your body fighting an invader that thinks it has. Now, you're not going to be sick very long, because soon enough your body's going to think, oh, no more virus, no more bacteria, we can shut this all down, we're good to go. So those symptoms don't usually last very long, and they last way less than the actual illness, and they're not going to cause permanent harm like the actual illness. So are you really sick? No. It's just the vaccine doing what it's supposed to and tricking your body into trying to fight an infection that isn't there. Okay. The last thing I want to touch on, we may have touched on this already, but I want to make sure it doesn't get missed, is the differences between vaccines, antibiotics, and antiseptics. These are all three things we use to help keep us from getting sick or cure us when we do get sick. And I want to make sure you get a clear understanding of what these, how these things are similar and how they're different. Now, vaccines we've talked about, you got to get a vaccine before you're sick because it prevents infection. It's not going to do you any good to get a COVID vaccine when you're in the middle of having COVID. Your body's already got its immune system going, okay? And it works, we mainly use vaccines against viruses, though you can make them for bacteria and other things. We mainly use them against viruses. Antibiotics, if you break down that word, bio means life, anti means against life. So antibiotics are used on bacteria only. They don't work on viruses because viruses don't have all those different life processes the bacteria have that we talked about. Viruses don't have nuclei, they don't have ribosomes, they're not making proteins, they're not using energy. So all that stuff that we could interrupt to keep them from living or reproducing, you can't do with a vaccine or with a virus. With a bacteria, we can. So antibiotics are there to attack some mechanism of bacterial survival. So antibiotics you get after you get sick, and they kill living cells. That's their point. So we use them against bacteria. Antiseptics are used to disinfect surfaces only, things like bleach or Mr. Clean or even soap and water. These things that alcohol, or iodine or neosporin, those are all antiseptics. You put them on the surface to kill any bacteria and a lot of viruses that are found on surfaces. Okay, they're pretty strong generally. They'll work on bacteria and a lot of viruses, but because they're so strong and they're made just to go on surfaces, if you don't want to drink them, don't drink bleach. Okay, it will kill you along with all the other crap living in you, but it will kill you too. So it's not any good. So antiseptics just on surfaces, that's what we've been using to clean your desks and everything every day during the COVID stuff. That's an antiseptic. So vaccines, before you get sick, generally used against viruses. Antibiotics, after you get sick, used against bacteria because they disrupt the life cycles. Antiseptics, used before or after you get sick to either prevent you from, to kill any pathogen that's on the surface. Okay, either to keep you from getting sicker or to keep you from getting sick at all. And that will do it for this section of the notes, guys. And I will see you later. So long.